for a special school board meeting. And I would like to call this meeting to order, July 28th, 2020. The time is now 5:05 p.m. The purpose of today's meeting is to hold a public hearing to consider the adoption of the 2020-21 tentative millage rates and the 2020-21 tentative budget. Following the recommendation of Governor DeSantis and the Florida of Education, this meeting will be held virtually, streamed live, and will be posted to the district YouTube channel upon completion of the meeting. Please note that the chat feature has been turned off for this virtual meeting, and please silence your cell phones. I would like to take this opportunity to remind the members of the public of the district's mission, which is to ensure that each student achieves his or her highest personal potential, and of the district's vision to be a world-class school system. Tonight's agenda includes presentation on the percent of increase or decrease over the rollback rate, the proposed millage, a budget overview, and the proposed tentative budget. Public hearing on the tentative budget, adoption of the required local effort, the basic discretionary millage, capital outlay millage, resolution determining revenues and millages, and the resolution adopting the tentative millage rates for fiscal year 2020-2021. The fiscal year 21 tentative budget and related resolution adopting the tentative budget. Also, the acceptance of the 2020 certification of taxable value and scheduling of the final budget public hearing. Also included in the agenda are comments from board members, board attorney, and superintendent. Board members, is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Moved by Ms. Gittens and seconded by?
Melissa. Seconded by Melissa.
Oh, okay.
I move.
Thank you, Mrs. Morgan. Mrs. Gittens moves to adopt the agenda as presented, and that is seconded by Mrs. Giovanelli. Please record your vote.
Okay, I'm not logged in yet on board docs, so
well, yeah, I don't see my vote up yet either. But we'll ask Latanya to help us with that.
Yeah, I need to get my.
Yes, if Latanya can record my positive vote, yes.
I'm logged in. I have nothing.
I have nothing either.
Yeah, because it doesn't ask us to join the meeting for this one.
Right.
That's why. So.
Oh, okay.
If you all refresh, you can join the meeting. I just did that, and I was able to join the meeting.
Excuse me, board members. You can join the meeting now. The vote is up. There was some technical difficulties on our end. So join the meeting now and take your vote. We're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer.
Yep.
Thank you, Jen.
Okay. Please record your votes, ladies. And Latanya or Jennifer, will you tally the vote for us?
Ms. Vaughn, how would you like to vote?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And then the motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay. I will now turn the meeting over to Dr. Greg Adkins, Superintendent, Dr. Amy Desamore, Chief Financial Officer, and Mrs. Kelly Letcher, Director of Budget. Dr. Adkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, it is our pleasure to present to you the FY21 tentative budget. So at this point, I'll turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Dr. Desamore, and her team to take us through the budget.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you, Dr. Atkins and members of the board. This hearing is the first of two public hearings that are required under Florida statutes to give the public an opportunity to provide input into the proposed millage levy and budget for this fiscal year. The superintendent submitted his proposed tentative budget to the board on July 24. This hearing was advertised in the news press on July 25. The second and final budget public hearing by your approval will be held on Tuesday, September 8 at 5:05 p.m. here in our boardroom. And the notice of that meeting to the public will be through a direct mailing from the property appraiser's office. That mail document is known as the Truth and Millage Notice, or TRIM, and is sent as required by law. I will now turn the meeting over to Ms. Kelly Letcher so she can take you through some important budget information.
Thank you. Trey, can you put the presentation up now? Thank you. And if you can go to the page that starts with the rollback rate. Thank you. As outlined by TRIM requirements, we must discuss the millage rollback rate. The rollback rate is the millage necessary to generate the same amount of money as raised in the prior year using this current year's tax roll. Next page, please. The calculated rollback rate is 5.9168 mils. The proposed millage rate for 2021 is 6.058 mils, which is a decrease of 0.089 mils from the 1920 millage rate of 6.147 mils, and an increase of 2.39% over the rollback rate. The required local effort portion of the increase is 1.52% of that 2.39% increase. Next page, please. The new millage rate will generate approximately $25.6 million in the previous year because of the increase in the tax roll. We put this next slide in to show the amount over the rollback rate from year to year. We wanted to make sure that everyone could see what the rollback rate was as you go through the different years. The next slide, please. The required local effort portion of it, of the millage rate, is a 3.810. That includes 3.805 of the current millage rate and a 0.05 of the prior period adjustment, which is an adjustment because we didn't generate the dollars that the state thought we would have generated in the prior year. So they make adjustment in this year to provide those dollars to us. The discretionary mills is a 0.748. The capital mills is 1.5, which is, those are the same as they have been in the past. And the total millage rate this year will be 6.058%, which is a 0.089 decrease over last year's millage rate. Next slide. As you can see, our millage rate continues to drop, and that is not unusual. As the tax roll goes up, the millage rate traditionally will go down in order to hold down the amount of money that the district generates off of the increased tax roll. Next slide.
All right, to share a little bit of the tax roll history, and this is a nice graph that shows a good graphical representation of what's happened with our tax roll from its large dip that ended in 2012, and then to see how it's increased over the past several years. This is the 8th year in a row of a tax roll increase for us, and this 6.32% increase of the tax roll up to $96.5 billion this year is the largest increase in the tax roll that we've had since 2018. So just some information on that tax roll. On the next slide, you'll see in some information about the type of effects it will have, this new millage will have on taxpayers. Now, though the tax rate did decrease by 1.4%, you heard what the old tax rate was and the new tax rate, and that is a decrease of 1.4%. Because the tax roll increase surpassed that, taxpayers will see generally, for the most part, a slight increase in their tax to be expected. So we have a representation here of looking at those folks who would see a 3% increase in their taxable value, and those would be those people who are under the Save Our Homes Amendment. For example, on that $200,000 home, they are likely to see in school taxes an increase in their taxes of about $21. And so the same for those that would see a 6.32%, and we picked that percentage amount because that is the percentage that the tax roll increased this year. Anyone who would see on average that 6.32% increase in their taxable value, that is, they are not homesteaded, on a $200,000 home, their tax increase that they would notice for school taxes would be a little less than $59. So on the next slide, again, you see a breakdown of the millages and the amount to be raised by those millages. The millage rate will generate about $25.6 million more than the previous year because of the increase in the tax roll. So the total proposed millage levy is, as you see on the slide before you, broken out between required local effort, the basic discretionary, and the capital outlay mills for a total millage of 6.058 and a total amount to be raised of $561,719,687.
Next slide, please. As was presented to you by the superintendent's budget on the 24th that you received, the tentative budget is going to be a total of $1,850,758,936. That's broken down between the different funding sources. The general fund is at $959,816. The debt service is $89,405,472. Capital is $524,664,577. Special revenue grants is at $69,601,512. Our food service is at $69,605,191, and our internal services $138,083,368. Next page. So this next section is really for the public's benefit because, as you know, you all know, each part of our budget is earmarked for specific purposes. The general fund part of the budget is our main budget that pays for the majority of our operating expenses, our teachers, and everything else that goes along with that. The debt service pays for the debt on our schools and things we have to borrow money to pay for those. The capital fund is used to build our schools, to buy equipment, and provide maintenance and things for our schools. Next slide. The food service supports the breakfast and lunch programs for all of our students. The special revenue federal funds are funds that we get through grants that are for specific purposes. And the internal service funds are funds like our insurance and things cost for the district. Next slide. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into some of the funds. So as I said, our general fund is our major source of revenue, and it covers the majority of our daily operations. That is budgeted at $959.4 million, and that's about 52% of the total budget. It's set up to support over 96,000 students in FY21, and we're targeting certain initiatives. Some of the initiatives are the teacher salary increases that the governor put in the budget at the 47.5, the reading initiatives at elementary level, continuing the additional 30 minutes at select elementary schools, standardizing some middle school schedules, and some additional ESOL supports at our schools. Next page.
The Florida Education Finance Program, or as the FEFP, as you all know, is the way that we receive our funding from the state. The FEFP is $765.5 million for the county, and that's a $30.6 million increase over the previous year. So that is a 2.3% increase in per pupil funding. That being said, 1% of that increase goes directly towards the teacher salary increases provided by the governor. Approximately 4.5 million of our total from the Florida Education Finance Program will go to the private school scholarships, the McKay and the Florida Empowerment. Yeah, sorry about that. That's we get $7,969 per FTE. It's a base student allocation of $4,319.49, which is a $40 increase over last year's. And the state funding part of the FFP is about 45%. So as Kelly just mentioned, and this pie shows you that in terms of where in the general fund or in our operating revenues, where those revenues come from. About 55%, the majority of those funds are actually generated from local sources, or that is for the most part property taxes, followed by about 45% at the state level, generally through the FEFP, and then a very small amount in the operating funds, less than 0.5% from our federal funds. On the next slide, you see a pie graph that shows you graphically how those dollars in the operating fund are allocated for the fiscal year as of the tentative budget. So as you would expect, the majority of our funds are allocated in the instruction or the direct school expense category at about 69%. You then also see where the rest of the dollars are allocated. And we want to focus specifically in on the 9% piece of the pie here on contingency and reserve, which we know are going to play a very important part in our budget this year. So if we go to the next slide, we talk a little bit about how these contingencies and reserves break down. So of course, as we've discussed before, our reserves protect the district's financial position. And as I said, they'll play an important part in our budget for planning for this year and for future years, as we do expect that our current circumstances will have a long-term impact both on the state and local financial condition. So as part of that 9% piece of the pie, we do have set aside in there the board's contingency, which represents 3% of new revenue. And as you all, and that's equal to about $24 million in this fiscal year. As you all know, if we do not have that 3% set aside, then we become subject to state monitoring, and we do not want to be in that position. So that board contingency is set aside as part of those reserves. Also, as part of that reserve number in that 9%, we have $15.9 million that is set aside as a reserve for future reductions and or to fill the needs of the district. We do expect, as we have discussed within some of our previous budget conversations, that there could be a mid-year reduction in the budget. Through all of the losses of state revenues throughout the past several months and what's been happening in our economy since the shutdown due to COVID, we expected some significant budget reductions when the governor released his budget at the beginning of the fiscal year. We did have a slight budget reduction, as you all are aware, with the loss of the school recognition dollars and the lottery dollars. But that was a relatively small decrease compared to the loss of revenue at the state level. So we will be monitoring what happens at the state level in terms of those losses of revenue, but we do believe that we need to position the district to be able to handle any future reductions in revenue based on how the state may be collecting revenue throughout the rest of this year. In addition, we also expect that there will be many needs that the district will have this year based on the going back to school in this pandemic and some of the additional needs that is driving. So personal protective equipment, different equipment and cleaning supplies that the schools will need, contracted services that we need to bring in order to handle that cleaning. So those funds will also be used to fulfill those needs when they do arise. So those funds really are from, garnering all of the dollars that we did not spend in the previous year, given the fact that we did shut down most of our in-person operations at an early date. So by taking those dollars, kind of reserving them in the next year's budget, we're hoping to be able to use those to effectively plan for any future reductions, the additional needs that the school district may have, and then also being in a better position to handle what will come in fiscal year 22's budget, as we expect that it's going to be a long-term proposition to have to deal with some budget difficulties based on our current situation.
Next slide, please. So some other parts of our budget is the food service budget, and that's currently budgeted at $55.5 million. That includes breakfast and lunch for every child at our school at no cost to the parents. We will continue with the community eligibility program in FY21. Next slide. So our special revenue are our grants that come in. The biggest grants that we have are Title I, IDEA, and then there's some other federal grants that we get, Title II, Title IV, and then Title III, and then there's some grants that people go out and apply for. The special revenue is currently budgeted at $69.6 million, and as you know, these will continue to increase throughout the year as we receive the grants. Included in this amount is the CARES Act funds. Those are the funds that were provided because of the COVID-19. Next slide, please. So we did go into detail in the previous presentation with you all about the CARES Act, but I just wanted to touch again on the CARES Act and the parts of it. There are 6 parts of the CARES Act. I won't read them all. We've listed them here. And they each have an individual purpose when they do it. We have one that we receive for summer and extended learning, for our CTE program, for our post-secondary programs, and also for our Head Start and early Head Start programs. Next slide. The biggest one was the ESSER, or the elementary and secondary one, and it comes in around $21.8 million. So while we provided the information on all of the grants before, I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on some of the services that we're looking at providing through the ESSER grant. We're looking at providing an additional 30 minutes for some of our select secondary schools. We are providing additional intervention specialists at the elementary level. We're providing additional reading coaches at some of our schools. We are going to provide additional software for our ESE programs, our ELL programs, and some of our basic instruction. We are going to provide some additional resource for ACT and SAT prep. As you all know, some of our families have the need for internet connection, so we're providing hotspots to them. We are providing some mental health services and psychological assistance for our students so that we can help them through this time.
So our capital funds in the tentative budget are currently budgeted at $524.7 million. So our major sources of funding in that fund are both local property taxes and the sales tax. And some of the major projects we have planned within the capital fund over that 5-year plan, and the complete 5-year capital plan is part of your tentative budget materials that you received. But our major projects within that 5 years include 2 new elementary schools, 2 new middle schools, a high school, a K-8 building, and 2 rebuilds in Cypress Lake Middle and Franklin Park Elementary. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about our debt service funds that are currently at $89.4 million in your tentative budget. We list for you that statutory debt capacity. Remember that we are not allowed by statute over 75% of the money that we generate through our capital property tax dollars on debt service. We are at less than half of that statutory capacity. And then you as a board have always said you wanted us to stay more in the 50% realm as opposed to the 75% realm. And of that capacity, we are at 32.4% budgeted as of the tentative fund. Now, keep in mind that these numbers do only include debt service that we pay with funds other than sales tax. We do anticipate that we will be using, of course, our sales tax funds to pay debt service of the new schools that we have just contracted for, to pay that debt back with sales tax. That sales tax debt service payment are not included inside these statutory capacities because that statutory capacity really only deals with that capital millage. And we do estimate, according to the capital plan, that we'll receive about $57 million in sales tax revenue in this fiscal year. So we will be watching that closely as everything that is happening within our local economy will have a large impact as to how and when we collect those sales tax revenues. So on the next slide, we just wanted to give you an overview of the current situation with COVID and how we are dealing with that in all of our budgeted funds, because it does have an impact across the board. So we spoke previously about the general fund and some of the things that we are covering within the general fund related to the pandemic. So providing that personal protective equipment for all of our staff and students, and deep cleaning and disinfecting that we anticipate will be happening throughout the year. And our capital funds, we have budgeted for and will be expending funds for student technology. So those laptops and access to technology that our students need in the case of digital learning, that is budgeted within our capital funds. In our special revenue fund, we do have a budget for hotspots within the CARES Act, as Kelly just mentioned, so that we can make sure that those students who choose to learn virtually or that must learn at a distance based on whatever circumstances our district may be in at the time, they have the appropriate resources in order to do that. And inside of food service, we will be expending resources to make sure that we can accomplish mobile feeding. So that is for those students who do not come every day face-to-face and are involved in our Lee Home Connect, still have the opportunity to come to a school in their area and be provided meals if they need that service.
So within this budget, we did our best to support 121 schools, over 96,000 students, to support the initiatives of the state, to support the district's vision and mission, and we kept the budget centered on the safety of our students and our staff, on student achievement, and in Vision 2030. And with that, we would like to have the superintendent's recommendations for tonight.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public hearing. We will now recess the special school board meeting and open the public hearing to consider the adoption of the tentative proposed millage rates and the tentative budget for 2021. Mrs. Dupree-Bruno, do you have any comments that were submitted electronically or persons in attendance in the boardroom who wish to speak?
There are no electronic communication. However, I do believe there is one person in the boardroom.
Thank you. And we bring that person forward.
Yes, that is correct. Just one speaker at the moment.
Thank you.
He wants to speak too. He must have gone to the bathroom.
No, he said.
Oh, because he left his stuff here. Hello, I'm Denise Eberly. I live in Alva, Florida. I'm just here to, I have a question if you can answer it. Do you decide to do this tax increase or does it go out for a vote?
Ma'am, at this point, we're just taking your comments. The superintendent perhaps can answer that question when he comes back with his recommendation, but at this time, we're just taking comments.
Okay, well, that has a lot to do with it. I'd like to know if the public gets a vote in this, or if the school board just decides to increase the taxes. Anyway, I'm against it. Right now, I think it's the worst time to even ask for a tax increase in anything. So many people are out of work right now. People can't pay their mortgages. People aren't paying their rent, which affects the people that have to hold the mortgages for these people to pay their rent. So increasing mine and anybody else's property taxes right now is a bad thing. I mean, I live on a fixed budget. I'm on Social Security. And what's killing me is the increase in taxes on my property taxes and insurance. If this continues, I'm going to end up being homeless, because what costs me more than anything else is these taxes that keep on going on, and the insurance premiums. Not that you're involved in that, but when you put it all together, it adds up to a pretty hefty sum. Right now, people need to get back to work, kids need to get back to school, things need to get back to normal. When that happens, you'll start getting more money as people start coming back in and traveling and coming in back to Florida, and then your sales tax will increase when people start coming back to Florida. I understand that's what a big problem here is because right now you're not getting the revenue from that sales tax and from people coming in to the state. So eventually that'll all come back, and here you are asking for more tax dollars from us local people, and that's all I have to say is I think it's a really bad time to do this, and your schools have been closed for months, so I'm sure you must have money left over from that you could, and then you're going to be getting more money from the CARES Act. Anyway, right now that's my opinion of it, and I totally disagree with an increase in taxes based on based on what I said. And I think you just need to be more fiscally responsible with your money. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Attorney Dupree Bruno, no further speakers.
There are no further speakers, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then at this time, Dr. Atkins, please continue by stating your recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first recommendation is recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the 2020-2021 tentative proposed required local effort millage of 3.810 mils with a proposed amount to be raised of $353,276,990. The required local effort millage includes basic RLE of 3.805 and a prior period adjustment of millage of 0.005. And just for the viewing audience, that is required. That's what the legislators require that we set our tax at. Second recommendation is recommend the Lee County School Board adopt a 2020-2021 tentative proposed basic discretionary millage of 0.748 mils. The proposed amount to be raised of $69,357,268. So that's the discretionary portion of the board's discretion. Next recommendation is recommend the Lee County School Board adopt a 2020-2021 tentative proposed capital outlay millage of 1.500 with a proposed amount to be raised of $139,085,429. The total millage will equal 6.058 mils with a total amount to be raised of $561,719,687. The total millage rate to be levied is more than the rollback rate. It is an increase in the rollback rate of 2.39%. Next is recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the resolution determining revenues and millages levied and the resolution adopting the tentative millage rates for the fiscal year 2020-2021. So recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the tentative budget and related resolution adopting to the tentative budget for the 2020-2021 school year as follows. General operating, $959,398,816. Special revenue budget of $139,206,703. debt service budget of $89,405,472, capital outlay budget of $524,664,577, internal service budget of $138,083,368, for total tentative budget of $1,850,758,936. Recommend that the Lee County School Board accept the 2020 certification of taxable value of Lee County Form DR420S. Authorize the superintendent to complete and execute the form. Recommend that the Lee County School Board schedule a public hearing on the final 2020-2021 millage levies and the final budget for the 2020-2021 school year for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020, at a specially scheduled board meeting to begin at 5:05 p.m. in the Lee County Public Education Center boardroom. That, I believe, finalizes my recommendations for this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. I will now close the public hearing and reconvene the special school board meeting of July 28th, 2020. The board will now consider each of the superintendent's recommendations. Dr. Atkins, please restate your recommendations individually, allowing the board the opportunity to vote before moving on to the next one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first is to recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the 2020-21 tentative proposed required local effort millage of 3.810 mils, with the proposed amount to be raised of $353,276,990. The required local effort millage includes basic RLE of 3.805 and a prior period adjustment millage of 0.005.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you. Mrs. Patrica moves that we adopt the superintendent's recommendation, and I'm trying to find a second, but I can't see everybody. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh. I'm sorry.
Madam
Okay,
Chair,
I have a second by Ms. Morgan.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
perhaps Mr. Davis could take down the shared screen.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you. Okay, great. So moved by Ms. Patrica and seconded by Mrs. Morgan. Any discussion, board members? Ms. Jordan? No, okay. Ms.
I was doing your second by hand.
I'm sorry. Okay. I've got that up now that the PowerPoint is down. Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
I have a question, and I don't know if I just, as to why we didn't, I thought this was a public hearing, and when is the opportunity to address what the public states? And I know we have another meeting on September 8th, but when does the public's opinions or statements or whatever get addressed before we vote finally?
Oh, we had one public opinion this evening.
Right, and I was concerned because there was no answer at all to that public opinion.
Well, I did in my comments, I referred to the required local effort and the discretionary part of the budget.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Gittens?
Well, between now and September, if someone has questions or suggestions or whatever, how do they make those known? Is not the period between now and the final in order to get any input that we might get?
Dr. Desimore, do you want to? Thank you. Dr. Desimore will respond to that.
Yeah, yes, I can respond to that. So when the trim notices go out to the public, there is a telephone number that's listed on that, which is actually our office, the budget office, where they can call with any questions or comments, and we'll, answer the questions that they have. So in addition, if we wanted to address or talk about the comment today, just to clarify or to give a little bit of additional information, there are 3 parts to the millages that the board will vote on. And the board is to vote on it. The vote does not go to the public to vote for these individual millages. But the required local effort millage is one that is set by the state. And so that millage is set by the state, given to each individual school district through the FEFP program. And boards must vote to levy that millage, or else we will not receive the state portion of the funding through FEFP if less than the required local effort is levied. So that is one piece of information. And then there are 2 other millages, the discretionary mills, of which the maximum is also set by statute, and capital millage, in which the maximum is set by the statute as well. The total millage that we have this year is 6.058, and it actually is a decrease from last year's tax rate. Last year's tax rate was 6.147. So that's a decrease of 0.089 mils, or 1.4% in the tax rate. So that's a decreased tax rate that taxpayers will see based on the millages that have been set here.
I thank you very much for that, because it does, answer the questions, because upon receipt of the trim notice, it's already done. This is your tax. So I appreciate, on behalf of people that have asked questions, that you clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gittens. Any other discussion, board members? Ms. Jordan, do you still have your hand up? Okay. Can you lower your hand then? Okay.
Yes.
Seeing no other discussion then, board members, please record your vote. Ms. Thomas or Ms. Schaefer, do you have the votes tallied?
Madam Chair, unanimous.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. Dr. Atkins, recommendation number 2, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next recommendation is recommended the Lee County School Board adopted 2020-2021 tentative proposed basic discretionary millage of 0.748 mils, with a proposed amount to be raised of $69,357,268.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Vaughn?
I move to approve the superintendent's recommendations.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Is there a second? Ms. Gittens?
Yes, I second.
Yes, thank you very much. Any discussion? None. Board members, please record your vote.
Madam Chair, the vote is unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Motion passes 7-0. Dr. Atkins, recommendation number 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation is recommended the Lee County School Board adopted 2020-2021 tentative proposed capital outlay millage of 1.500, with a proposed amount to be raised of $139,085,429. Total millage will equal 6.058 mils, with a total amount to be raised of $561,719,687. Total millage rate to be levied is more than the rollback rate, is an increase in the rollback rate of 2.39%.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Ms. Giovanelli. Ms. Giovanelli, do you want to make your motion?
Sorry, I move to support the superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you very much. And a second, Mrs. Morgan? Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, board members, please record your vote.
Madam Chair, the votes is unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Motion carries 7-0. Dr. Atkins, recommendation number 4.
Okay, the next recommendation is recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the resolution determining revenues and millages levied and the resolution adopting the millage rates for the fiscal year 2020-2021.
Hey, board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Vaughn, please state your motion.
I move to approve the superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn, and a second, please. And Ms. Jordan. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, board members, please record your vote.
Madam Chair, unanimous.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thomas. Motion carries 7-0. Dr. Atkins, recommendation number 5, please.
This next recommendation is recommend that the Lee County School Board adopt the tentative budget and related resolution adopting the tentative budget for the 2020-2021 school year as follows. General operating, $959,398,816. Special revenue budget, $139,206,703. Debt service budget, $89,405,472. Capital outlay budget of $524,664,577. Internal service budget, $138,083,368 for total tentative budget of $1,850,758,936.
Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move we adopt the superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you, Mrs. Morgan, and a second, please, board members. Mrs. Jordan, thank you. Any discussion, board members? That's a really big budget, Dr. Atkins. Seeing no other discussion, please record your vote.
Madam Chair, unanimous.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Thomas and board members. Recommendation number 6, Dr. Atkins.
Recommend that the Lee County School Board accept the 2020 certification of taxable value of Lee County Form DR420S and authorize the superintendent to complete and execute the form.
Thank you, board members. Have you heard that you have heard the superintendent's recommendation? I'll entertain a motion to approve. Ms. Patrica.
Move that we adopt the superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica, and a second. Ms. Morgan. Thank you. Any discussion? Please record your votes, board members.
Madam Chair, unanimous.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. And finally, Dr. Atkins, recommendation number 7.
Recommend that the Lee County School Board schedule a public hearing on the final 2020-2021 millage levies and the final budget for the 2020-2021 school year for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020, at a specially scheduled board meeting to begin at 5:05 p.m. in the Lee County Public Education Center boardroom.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Board members, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. I'll entertain a motion for approval. Ms. Gittens?
I move we accept the superintendent's recommendation for a public hearing.
Thank you, Mrs. Gittens. And a second, board members. Ms. Morgan, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, board members, please record your vote.
Madam Chair, unanimous.
Motion passes 7-0. Next on the agenda are comments from board members, the board attorney, and the superintendent. Mrs. Giovanelli, comments at this time?
I have none.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica.
No, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Jordan.
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Gittens.
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Vaughn.
I have none.
Mrs. Morgan.
I have none.
Thank you, and I have none. Mr. Puy Bruno.
I have none.
And Superintendent Atkins.
I just thank you. No further comments at this time.
Thank you very much. At this point, having no other business come before this body and seeing no objections, this meeting is adjourned. Mr. Davis, do we stay on or do we go off and come back on?
Yes, we stay on.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay.